Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to meet you all here. I know we can't see everyone, unfortunately, but it's great to know that are so many of you here. Thank you so much for joining. For some quick housekeeping, we absolutely intended this to be an opportunity to answer questions, discuss comments, and we would love to hear from you throughout the session. Please feel free to ask any questions using the Q&A function or raise your hand and we can give you the virtual microphone. I will be very brief to kick off things. I am Daniele Magalhães and I lead the Global Climate Action Engagement Team at the UNFCCC Secretariat. Today, we are here to wrap up the public consultation on the future of Race to Zero, which was open for 10 weeks. As a reminder, Race to Zero is the non-state actor branch of the Climate Ambition Alliance launched by Chile at the UN Secretary General's Climate Action Summit in 2019. This global campaign is rallying non-state actors across the global economy to take rigorous and immediate action to halve global emissions by 2030 and deliver a healthier and fairer zero carbon world in time. Our members are committed through their partner initiatives to the same overarching goal: reducing emissions across all scopes swiftly and fairly, in line with the Paris Agreement, with transparent action plans and robust near-term targets. The campaign has seen impressive growth since it was launched in June 2020. It has almost doubled since this time last year, with now well over 6,200 members. It now needs to harness this moment and help turning these commitments into action, which will race towards this better, fairer, healthier, zero carbon world. In this session, we will hear from the two high-level champions, Gonzalo Muñoz and Nigel on the headline summary from the responses to the public consultation. As you know, if you responded to the consultation, we were particularly interested to hear respondents' thoughts on the following topics. Verifiable plans. What should we expect as solid plan from members in the Race to Zero? Measuring impact. What are the most meaningful and impactful actions members are taking which can serve as example, and how can we best consolidate measuring progress across the race? Additional criteria. Beyond the 4P criteria, what else should we expect of Race to Zero members? Holding members accountable. How can we best target support to members who are facing challenges in specific areas? And simultaneously, how can we best hold members accountable to their commitments to maintain the integrity of the campaign? The champions will share the general themes raised for each topic of the consultation, highlight some of the unique or differing perspectives which were offered, and relay some of the concrete suggestions made by respondents. With that, I'll hand over to Gonzalo, who will reflect on where Race to Zero stands today. Thank you, Gonzalo.
Thanks so much, Dani, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. We are really, really glad to be here, and it's absolutely critical to see COP as the starting line for Race to Zero. We need to continue building on the campaign's success to date and strengthen its capacity to support the implementation of climate action across its members. So we have already seen impressive action taken by our members with the support of the partners. As Dani has said, we need to continue transitioning this momentum and ambition into action and to support our members in implementing the robust commitments they have made in the very short time that it's needed. Thank you so much to all of you who have submitted insightful responses to this consultation. You know how important it is for us to base all of this work in the radical collaboration values. This feedback is tremendously useful to help us build on the campaign success to date. And there are a few things today that we want to highlight. So Nigel and I will briefly summarize some of the key points that have been made across each of the 4 themes, and then we would really like to welcome questions and comments from all of you. But first, I will pass on to my dear friend Nigel, who will walk you through the responses on plans and measuring impact. My dear brother, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Gonzalo. Thanks, Danny, and thanks everybody for joining. You know, there's a real sense of crescendo building in the run-up to COP26. We're hearing of new commitments to Race to Zero every day. I was in Korea recently. The biggest bank there's joined the Net Zero Banking Alliance. I heard last week that Maharashtra in India has got all 43 of cities in their state to join Cities Race to Zero. And I know Gonzalo's just getting cities and states and businesses and banks in Chile to join. I did a session in Climate Week with all the Stiftungswegrad, our German accelerator partner there, with 11 heavy industry. So this work is so crucial, right? Because we're really building momentum with thanks to all of your work, and the credibility of that momentum is what's at stake here. So I really want to thank all of you for building the momentum. I know many of you have been working on it long before we created the umbrella campaign of Race to Zero, and many of you have taken real time and care to respond to the consultation. I think that just is another manifestation of what we call radical collaboration. So I just want to show you we've taken all of your input really seriously, really value it, and together we make something that's much stronger and much more robust. I do want to say that you know, we really are building on decades of work from many of you. We're not trying to build anything new. You know, we've got a mandate from the UNFCCC, from the parties, from the countries in a formal multilateral process that created the role we have, which we can only exercise through this collaboration to drive ambition and action. And that means doing it in coordination with hundreds of partners, and it means doing it in a way that isn't duplicative. We're not trying to duplicate any of the work you're doing. So we take that mandate and that commitment to coordinating, not duplicating, very seriously. And we know that there's deep expertise in the organizations, institutions, and partners who've got expertise in all the different facets, you know, different sectors, different geographies, different methodological aspects. So I just want to really reiterate, we're not trying to duplicate anything. We're trying to lift up the best and make sure that we together are playing our role in driving action on climate change. Because we do know that Race to Zero can play that kind of catalytic role amongst people who may be new to the non-state actor movement, and we can use our platform to signpost new people towards partners and organizations who can help in the race to decarbonize. So together we can go much faster. And as Danny and Gonzalo described, the process has really helped to identify some of the gaps or relative weaknesses, areas we need to plug as a community as we look forward. So let me go through the first two and then hand back to Gonzalo. So first of all, verifiable plans. This is an easy thing to say, everyone should have a verifiable plan, but if we want to turn this into a machine of ratcheted implementation and credibility, how do we define a verifiable plan? So here's some of the things that we've heard from you. That next level down, what does a verifiable plan look like? So that we can all be confident that members who commit to the Race to Zero through one of the partner initiatives have thought enough about how they're going to deliver the plan, so they're credible plans. So here's a few of the things that came up. First, that plans should be based on backcasting from the target to align with the science. Second, that they should be holistic to encompass all the relevant aspects of an entity's operations. And of course, that varies by sector. Design of projects, political advocacy often goes beyond company operations. Thirdly, they need to be detailed enough. They need to be specific and consistent so that planned actions are laid out, and then it's possible to judge whether those actions have been taken place according to a plan with their associated timeline and impact. This all relies on transparency. So, you know, plans being public, and then the transparency of the annual kind of MRV cycle allows us collectively as a community to see whether those plans are being met or not. Being clear about where responsibility lies, so that plans are approved at the head of the organisation, and that responsibilities then allocated for implementation. That the plan should include connections to raising government ambition. That's one of the areas of most concern from many, is sometimes the big inconsistency between a company's plans and how it's engaging with government. So we want, there's a very strong sense that plans should outline how the city or the business or the investor is going to drive the ambition loop that we all talk about. And then finally, but one of the most important ones, being clear about capital allocation, or if you like, the put your money where your mouth is test. So look, there was strong consensus across all the suggestions of what the minimum components should be across different sectors, regions and actor types. But you also were clear that we should be flexible enough to recognize the sectoral and regional nuances. So that's going to require some real judgment about how do you standardize nuance, right? Because they're kind of, there's a tension there between the two. I don't know, from the area that I've done most work in my career, on the business side, that things like the sectoral specific methodologies that the Science Based Targets Initiative works on, and I think that there'll be similar ways of distinguishing between different contexts of subgroups in all your initiatives. Again, I want to highlight that in the spirit of avoiding duplication, we recognize that there's a lot of work already going on engaging with members of the various partner initiatives around the issue of solid plans. Just to name a few that I'm aware of, Exponential Roadmap is exploring providing very streamlined and targeted services in terms of how to go from the target to implementation, so how to create a plan. The Net Zero Asset Owner Alliance is using its protocol and a progress report, which we know is forthcoming. SBTI is providing guidelines of how its members can have their targets approved, of course. Normative is supporting the SME Climate Hub in measuring emissions and establishing reduction plans. And I'm also aware that CDP and ADEME in France have been working on their ACT methodology, which is exactly about how do you actually analyze as good, bad or ugly, not just a target, but a plan. And of course, we know that many more are working on that. So, just lost my slice. So I think this is going to be a journey, right? We're not going to overnight be able to say, here's what a verifiable plan is and here's not, because of all that complexity. But we're very clear that support for developing verifiable plans and assessing them needs to be further expanded, particularly across regions and sectors who are currently underrepresented. Next big area for improvement is measuring impact. And we heard from you the need for more consistency in reporting across members in the race. And again, the need to consolidate existing platforms rather than encouraging the creation of a proliferation of platforms. Again, that's a balance between us being biased towards one partner versus encouraging a proliferation. So that's a collective job for all of us to ensure non-proliferation. As part of this theme, we did ask you to tell us what you thought the most impactful actions of Race to Zero members could be. And here's some of the, and there's a lot of overlap here, I think, with the planning, perhaps not surprisingly. So some of the repeated suggestions were lobbying activities, investment, collaboration within sectors and also public-private partnerships, communication, and engaging in introducing regulation and legislation. Of course, if you're a city, or a region, of course, you've got different powers there than some of the other sectors. And again, same as with the plans, we know that measuring impact on those different areas is very complex. I'll give you a simple example. If somebody's lobbying against a carbon pricing regulation, is that anti-climate lobbying, or is the suggested legislation rubbish? Right? I mean, that, so in order to judge whether that lobbying is constructive or not, it's very difficult. It's not as simple as every bit of policy is good and no one should ever engage to change it. So a lot of complexity there. That said, a lot of calls for more consistency in defining and measuring emissions, in particular around scope 3. And so again, what I suspect we're going to come up with is a lot of complexity. In some areas we can move further, faster on, some that are going to be multi-year. And again, a suggestion that Race to Zero can help guiding the members towards relevant organisations to help with that. Well, not trying to do it ourselves, certainly. And a sense that, again, sectorally, the definition of scope 3 needs to be tightened up. I mean, a good example would be some of the surface sectors like advertising and service providers, very complex, right? So it's not a physical value chain. There's the sort of impact value chain. So that's something we want to facilitate to make sure that the campaign and members are all taking responsibility for all their activities and influence. As I say, in those two examples, like a strategy consultancy or an advertising agency, 99% of their climate impact is in the advice they give or the advertising campaigns that they run. So last thing I'll say is that, again, we want to consolidate efforts which already exist, like CDP and the Global Climate Action Portal, to centralize measurement and reporting of progress against emissions reduction. Again, we're not fans of proliferation, which is actually often gives an excuse for not engaging, because people spend too long trying to find out what's the right platform to use. So we try and keep consolidating. So let me hand back to Gonzalo to go through the other criteria.
Thanks so much. So additional criteria that we have learned and received information about, I will refer to some of the sort of responses. Generally suggested that all members should, for example, like engage in positive climate policy. And of course, that's something absolutely desirable. And across all respondents, there was a general consensus that members should align their operational commitments with their lobbying and educational activities in order to ensure integrity of their commitments. Another one is to demonstrate commitments to wider climate issues and building resilience. So the expectation, new members should show concrete action towards an equitable and just climate transition, supporting communities, workers, and those directly impacted by low carbon transition alongside emission reducing policies. Race to Zero will continue to raise hand in hand with its sibling campaign, Race to Resilience, and will help members contribute to those campaigns. For us, there's no way we can just move ahead with the mitigation part of the agenda, or the simplistic idea that Race to Zero or mitigation will solve the problem. We are absolutely committed to balance the agenda with both campaigns. Another element is to provide the evidence of improving education on the climate crisis. We receive a lot of information about the need for members to empower their communities to distinguish what good for net zero looks like, and to clarify the good from the bad, and to be not only transparent, but very proactive on educating and incrementing our culture when it comes to the climate crisis. Another super important element, of course, is to go nature positive. We know very well that we need to ensure that we are decarbonizing at pace and protecting nature and preserving our natural sinks, not only for the sake of incrementing the capacity of nature to be helpful for the, let's say, for the climate crisis in terms of sequestering and capturing more carbon, but also because of the importance of biodiversity for all of the different elements that are integrated into the agenda. So supporting members and when it comes to supporting members and of course holding them accountable, we saw this. The last part of the public consultation was very well focused on how to best target support to members who are facing the challenges and hold members accountable who are not meeting their commitments. And we have day by day receiving more asked about more and more questions about exactly how are we going to hold accountable for the commitments. So for this, there was a absolute general consensus across members that there should be a regular review of all members. You might have seen that that we launched the website part where all members are being shown, but then the members' progress against each of the 4 Ps could be also reviewed on a regular basis. Most respondents agree that this should be annual and absolutely publicly tracked. So if a member falls short of its commitment, it was often suggested that they should be granted a grace period within which to address the gap. But beyond that grace period, if the member still falls short of its commitments, most respondents agree it should be publicly removed from the race as per the below. So then there was also a mention on to be more explicit removal of a member if they do not meet their targets. Many responded across stakeholder groups supported the need for a more public removal of members who did not meet their targets. We want to strike a balance, of course, between supporting members and bringing them into the tent, and also being absolutely firm on what it means to be part of the race. I'm not reflecting on it's about walking the talk, but where we're in a race, it's about running the talk. So also there's a recommendation of full disclosure. Respondents definitely call for more disclosure around various elements of members' activities, including disclosure of all trade association membership, disclosure of all lobbying practices, disclosure of all investments, and so on. We of course value that such transparency would help address where to target the support or guidance for a member in the campaign that might not be meeting its commitments. So having run through these headline thoughts, I will hand back to Dani. We really look forward to your thoughts, comments, questions, opinions, suggestions. Dani, back to you.
Hi, thanks, Gonzalo. Thanks so much to the champions for all this explanation. This overview hopefully provides you with a clear sense of the general themes raised during the consultation. In summary, in the summary report that we will be uploaded shortly, you will also be able to see some of the specific perspectives and concrete suggestions that were made, which will help shape the future of the race. I will now open for questions or comments. I see there is already something coming on the chat. Justin just asked, and he asked specifically maybe to Nigel. It's great to hear the progress on the race to zero and future plans, but what about those that haven't joined the race to zero? Nigel, you have spoken in the past about those who don't join the race are choosing not to play their role. What steps will be taken to hold the leaders of those actors choosing not to join and to hold them to account, especially on carbon intensive ones? So Nigel or Gonzalo, please, the floor is yours for answering.
Yeah, a couple of thoughts there. I mean, that's a collaborative question for all of us, right? I mean, I think a lot of us. Well, I think that's where an ecosystem can be really helpful, right? Because some of us will focus on finding the positive stories and putting leaders on a pedestal and telling those stories. Others will focus on the laggards and trying to deal with them. So I think. I don't think we're really at the stage yet of focusing on people who haven't joined, because we've got such strong momentum that even a lot of companies who we never would have believed would have joined a year ago are joining. So I think that's probably that's a good question going forward, right? And we have discussed this a little bit, for example, when we talked about the breakthroughs and we've reached 30% of the cement companies in the world, of the major cement companies by volume, should we now list the 10 big cement companies who haven't joined? Right, maybe not to say they're evil, but just to say these are the next 10 companies we'd like to join, and maybe we get more specific. And I know, I think a lot of the different initiatives, like I know Women in Business, because I know well, would run campaigns where they'd say, I mean, I think some of the work on cement companies joining now was started 2 years ago, 3 years ago, because, you know, sometimes it takes a long time. So I think I would say that's the power of a coalition. Like any one of the members of the Marrakesh Partnership Coalition could decide we're going to start working on cement companies or steel companies. It's also, remember, the power of there being multiple vectors within the coalition. So, you know, the strength of GFANs, the 250 finance players now in the Race to Zero, they're all saying that they're going to realign their portfolio. So they're putting pressure on the companies who haven't joined the Race to Zero. Similarly, cities who are procuring. So if you take steel, you know, one of the business initiatives or one of the finance initiatives or one of the city initiatives through procurement. So I think that's a good question. I don't feel like it's top of our list right now. We're trying to really focus on the positive, but it could be a good thing to look at next year. Maybe identify the 10 biggest companies who haven't joined in each sector, and even just sharing that as the community and see who's got connections and try and run that as a collaborative campaign.
Thanks,
Let me ask another element to that. So adding to what Nigel mentioned, and there's a beauty on the campaign, not only the scope 3 being an element that is based on science. The scope 3 is also forcing all of this mechanism to start talking to many companies and organizations that might not be even connected to the topic. So let's not only assume that there are some organizations that are very well informed of all of this and are deciding very actively not to join, but there are also many of them that might not have the right level of information, and then while integrating value chains, while developing mechanisms for SMEs to also get integrated, while integrating mechanisms for clients in value chains also to get integrated, we are somehow forcing that. There is, of course, a force coming from the legislation or from the rules of the game, but also there's a capacity of influencing that, while some of those members of the Race to Zero are already starting to talk in their value chain by saying, people, we need you providers, we need you clients to also be talking and walking the talk and running the talk, because if not, I will fail as well. We're seeing that in the financial institutions, as Nigel said, but we're also seeing some FOMO being expressed in certain industries where the current members of Race to Zero are reflecting a beautiful level of competition in those sectors, while now the main competitors are trying to accelerate, to join, and honestly, we're seeing that very rapidly. So if you draw the curve of what had happened since we started, let's say we started this race in September 23rd, 2019 with the Secretary General Summit, and with the first expressions, then we launched Race to Zero formally in June 2020. So a little bit more than 1 year ago, and you put those dots together, you will see that there has been an amazing acceleration in very short period of time, and mostly during this year, where we will definitely continue seeing more companies and more cities and more regions and more financial institutions joining, most of them because they kind of lost the train, they lost the leadership, they need to join the ones that have already joined.
Thanks, Gonzalo. Maybe we can jump for the next question then, which is quite talking about future in terms of timeline too. Will the race continue after COP? Are you envisaging some timeline? I don't know who wants to go first, Nigel, Gonzalo.
Sorry, did I understand properly that the Race to Zero?
Will it carry on after COP? I mean, look, will we have solved the climate crisis on November the 13th? No. Right. Therefore, the Race to Zero must continue. So it's a thank you for asking the straightforward question. Sorry if that's not clear. Absolutely. The Champions mandate currently lasts until the COP in 2025. So the Race to Zero is definitely running until the COP in 2025. And if the mandate is extended to 2030, maybe it will run to 2030. Look, we're really just getting going, and you guys have done an amazing job in building momentum. This feedback process is really important. At COP, we'll announce the changes. Some changes we'll make immediately, some will implement a bit more slowly in Q1. Others maybe will be things to reflect on more deeply next year. We can't change or fix everything. Some of them we don't. Some of them we're just starting the conversation really. But the race is definitely continuing. We're just finishing the warm-up lap.
So stretching.
Yeah, we're just stretching.
Yeah, so that comes to the next thing. How do we avoid reinventing the wheel? Don't we have existing reporting mechanisms that already work?
Well, I would say it's a not only valid, but absolutely central question. What we have been trying to avoid all the time with everything that we're doing when it comes to Race to Zero is not only reinventing the wheel, but overlapping in terms of initiatives. That's why there's a base on Race to Zero in relation to we are working with partners that know much more than us, the exact details, all of the members of Race to Zero, all of the member initiatives and all of the partners, they carry the capacity, and we are integrating their capacities and their efforts in order to align with single metrics that make sense to all of us. That's why it's been taking us a lot of work to get aligned and to check it once and again. And therefore, it's all about how do we collaborate together. And we have certain principles like this must be formal against the United Nations using the mandate that we have received, and two, based on science, offering the capacity of collaborating around those two big elements.
Thanks, Gonzalo. I don't know if Nigel wants anything else, but we have received some interesting congratulations from the UNEP side, saying they appreciate the Race to Zero for the reach accountability, and we are actively trying to create initiatives that will provide Race to Zero members. So that's very nice. And then the next question is kind of like a two steps question from Daniel. Can you address future of G funds, specifically as it relates to Race to Zero? And the second part of it is, what will your team and you individually be doing post COP26 other than taking a break? In other words, what does headcount and organization structure look like in 2022?
I'll take the second one. You take the first one.
Okay. So G fans, good. Good question. I was with Mark Carney in New York last week. We were talking about that. Mark Carney's committed to continuing in his role chairing G fans at least until the end of COP27. Much like the champions team, the G fans have, and the private finance hub have created a stronger support team to add to the great support we get from Danny's team and the Secretariat because of the breadth geographically and sectorally of this work, right? So with G fans, will continue into the future. We have an institutional relationship where G fans recognizes Race to Zero as the gold standard. So whatever we do collectively to keep evolving the Race to Zero, that will be embedded as the sort of baseline for G fans, which will then continue to use that to work on some of those cross-cutting issues like how to finance sectoral decarbonisation, how to drive mobilisation of private finance in emerging markets, etc. So I think that the relationship is very strong and it will continue.
Absolutely. So all of this is being designed to continue and absolutely independent on who has the honor of carrying the role that today relies on Nigel and myself. As you all might know, the part of the beauty of this mandate is that it's being carried by different people, ensuring the continuity by allowing those people to work 2 by 2 every year, we were definitely blessed with Nigel with this extra year. I'm not saying that COVID is a blessing, of course, but we were gifted with this extra year working together. That has, of course, meant that we had to spend at least, well, you're ending your second year. I'm ending my third year, and it has taken a lot of extra effort, and we are proud and absolutely thankful for having done that. In my case, of course, it's my role now to step aside and allow the African champion to take the position with Nigel, working in this agenda for Nigel's third year and the African champion's first year, and so on. That's as I said, part of the beauty of the role, and then recognizing and having been again gifted with an extra year that allowed us to analyze much more some of the complexities of the role and some of the opportunities that sometimes you cannot take into account when it's a very short period. We of course recognize that it's extremely important to develop a structure that can continue forward in a much stronger way. In Madrid, at 1CP25, we were asked by the parties. The parties not only extended the mandate another 5 years. The first mandate ended in 2020, and we were extended for another 5 years. That's why Nigel was referring to 2025, but also to do a feedback process around the Marrakesh Partnership in order to propose a new version of the Marrakesh Partnership at COP26, and that's what we're going to do. We've worked with the Marrakesh Partnership members and with a wider community of partners that have been collaborating with this agenda for the last 2 years, and so we are finalizing certain details that we will bring to Glasgow, and most of it is related to ensuring the continuity of not only the work of the champions, the collaboration platform that is operating fantastically, but also the continuity of the 3 campaign: mitigation, race to zero, adaptation and resilience, race to resilience, and then GFANs for the financial mechanisms, where we see absolutely the need of continuing all of them in the long run. They were all designed as the best way to collaborate to collaborate with the process for the parties to integrate most of this knowledge in the future enhancement of the NDCs and even at the global stocktake. That's what we are planning, and of course, as you said, we will take a break. We will probably drink some Scotch whiskey at the end of COP, but then I'm absolutely sure Nigel and the future champion will roll the sleeves and continue running as fast as they can. I will take any position that will allow me to continue helping and celebrating the work that all of you are doing. That is amazing. That is sending also a lot of hope to many people that are perceiving that there's something happening here that allows us to understand very well what can we do in order to solve the climate crisis.
Thanks, Gonzalo. We now have someone who will speak. Mohammed, I hope you can, your microphone should be ready to speak. Yeah, there you go.
And maybe, Mohammed, if you could put your video on as well, it'd be lovely to see you while we're listening to you.
Okay, I don't know. Okay, well, I don't know where I can access the video.
Yeah, it seems like there is no way for Mohammed to do the video for us.
Okay, it's a shame.
Sorry.
We'll just imagine you, Matt. Just tell us where you're calling from and which organisation you're with, Mohammed, so we know where you are.
Okay, thank you for having me here. We live in a human-dominated planet, putting unprecedented pressure on the systems on Earth. So this is bad news, but perhaps this is surprising to you. It's also part of the good news. We are the first generation, thanks to science, to be informed that we may be undermining the stability and the ability of planet Earth to support human development. as we know, so we only have this one planet, but we are using the Earth's resources much faster than they can be replenished. I think the problem is clear. We know we need to reduce our emissions and draw the existing carbon out of the atmosphere. And I think this is the only time governments will be investing this much money before crucial climate deadline. And the question that should be asked in enough time, that's what is the alternative for the countries that using or based their economy is based on fossil fuel and natural gas. I think it's hard for them to switch from burning fossil fuel and coal power to premium energy and green energy. And ultimately, the solution here is this is where collaboration can help. Yeah, I mean humanity. I mean we humans are deeply dependent on one another. So thank you, and that's it.
Thank you, Mohammed. I'm not sure how your question relates to the subject of the conversation, which is the consultation on the future evolution of the race to zero. But let me just try and quickly answer. First of all, I think we're all here, everyone on this call, because we deeply understand the science and the scale of the crises of climate change and biodiversity and inequality, which are all interwoven. So we completely agree with your observation that we only have one planet and we're currently not stewarding it wisely collectively. As to the alternative to burning fossil fuels, I mean, the first point is there is no future without stopping the burning of fossil fuels. And we do know what the alternatives are. They're mass deployment of cheap renewables and then the use of some of those cheap renewables to create green hydrogen to decarbonize the processes which we can't electrify. And that's why we're driving the race to zero to halve emissions. And every country is going to have to find its own unique pathway. I mean, it might be an idea, Gonzalo, maybe you say something about Chile's pathway, because Chile's pathway is very different. The UK, for example, it will burn its last lump of coal in 3 years' time. But the UK is an island with a lot of windy seas all around it. So the UK's transition is based on a lot of wind power. But Gonzalo, maybe you say something about Chile, and then Danny, maybe we go to the next question.
Sure. Yeah, in the case of Chile, we have gone through a beautiful process of understanding that we cannot rely anymore on fossil fuels, starting by producing our power with renewable electricity, both mostly solar and wind. Solar in the north and wind in the south when it comes to our geography. Also understanding that Chile is not a fossil fuel producing country, so that represents a really big economic and development opportunity. We have been accelerating now the closing of the coal power plants. In 2019, there was a plan being proposed by the power generators that set 2040 as the target, and that is being massively accelerated nowadays. And we know actually that we will close all coal power plants a lot sooner than that, but also due to the ramp up of renewable energy in the country, everything related to green hydrogen started appearing as a beautiful opportunity. On one side, to decarbonize the rest of the energy grid and the heavy duty transport and industries, but then offering the possibility of green hydrogen to become, if not the biggest, one of the two biggest sectors of the Chilean economy in the next 10 to 15 years, and that's where we're sitting today. All of that starts by saying no more fossil fuels. Let's accelerate in every single sector of the economy with based on the gift that we have of having such a wonderful renewable energy sources.
Thanks, Gonzalo. And then I think we jump for our last 10 minutes. So we have 2 questions to go, and then we may close the panel today. So let's go for the second question from Nicola. How would you deal with members pledging and being on track on specific actions while continuing business as usual in all the rest of its activities? Would that foster greenwashing?
That's a good question.
Oh, I get sure. I mean, you
Well,
prefer
go,
to
no,
react?
you go first.
I mean, my first reaction is that that's something that was partly mentioned in what we referred to initially on the importance of tracking all of that very closely. It's a lot about on one side how close we are to them, how we can identify those gaps very rapidly, offer them a possibility of solving it, and then we as a community have to solve when is the moment to publicly refer to a member being delisted. The capacity of us, and I'm referring not only to the high-level champions, but this community to be close to that and identify that very rapidly is how we can collaborate as close as we can. It's a lot about and strengthening the capacity of the initiatives and the partners of Race to Zero for them to detect that very rapidly. You can imagine, and now we have more than 6,000 members. In the future, we expect to have tens of thousands of members. It's impossible to imagine that never to champions or the team that they can build will be capable of mapping and scanning permanently tens of thousands of members. So we have to strengthen the capacity of the partners of Race to Zero and the initiative to be able to be very close to the members, so we can identify those gaps, clarify that, immediately give an opportunity of solving the gap, and if not, definitely we'll have to get to a point when some of the members should be publicly delisted.
Yeah, and I think the question is about, so the question is what if companies are on track, but they're doing other things? So I think, and these bits, but I guess the question for me is, what do you mean by the rest of their activities? So because we have to be careful not to try and make the Race to Zero be the global standard for everything. That's a way that a lot of sustainability initiatives just get so complicated that they end up being really confusing. The Race to Zero is about driving emissions to zero. It's not about trying to solve every problem in the world. So that's unfortunate, but we don't have the mandate to solve every problem in the world, nor the resources, nor the capability. Now, some other activities that are very related to the Race to Zero, like lobbying on energy and climate regulation, you've told us we should very much include, and I think there's a very strong case to make that, because that's part of the power of cities or businesses or investors to change their environment. But I think we should be careful not to extend that arbitrarily into all sorts of other issues, both because of the mandate, the capacity, and the relevance to the capacity. So again, without knowing what other activities you're meaning, I just a little bit of caution there about trying to be the global police.
Thanks both. And then we have the next question. Pundits all over the world are already declaring COP26 a failure before it's even started. What can we all do to prevent this COP from failing? And what out-of-the-box thing could we do with others to catapult us forward so we are not just stretching, but running? It's quite a difficult question, I guess.
Well, first of all, I don't think people all over the world. I don't know who asked that question. So state your source. Where are people all over the world claiming copies of failure? Right. So, and that's the first thing I do is let's pick up the phone and talk to those people who are saying it's a failure. I've just been on a webinar with Fiona Harvey, the Guardian journalist, who often writes very critically about progress from governments and business. And she was making it clear that we all know that we will not be on track to 1.5 in Glasgow, but we have to keep 1.5 alive. Otherwise, we're starting to give up. And then when we start to give up, then we create terrible futures for ourselves and our children and our grandchildren. So I think what can we do? First thing is make sure people know that the measure of success in Glasgow isn't a new agreement that's magicked out of the meeting of world governments, right? Make sure we explain to people the process. The agreement was Paris. The goal is net zero. The mechanism is the ratchet. Because still a lot of people think that governments are going to meet to come up with a new agreement. That's not going to happen. So
No, not even a new agreement. It's like turning off the oven, turning down the thermostat. Like,
So make sure you tell people what's really happening in Glasgow. Second of all, frame success as keeping 1.5 alive. Because if you frame success as delivering 1.5, then you've decided that it's a failure. Paris doesn't frame it like that. We don't frame it like that. That's not. I mean, you can choose to frame it like that, but then you're choosing to define failure. You're choosing to predetermine failure. And then what we're doing, all of us here, is demonstrating momentum in the non-state actor community, which drives the ambition loop. So tell stories of just how quickly the race to zero has grown, how many trillions of dollars are committed to net zero, how many hundreds of cities, how many thousands of companies, and then the stories within the sectors that you know of increasing investment in green steel and green hydrogen, 30% EVs in Europe, 3% 3 years ago. So it's up to us. It's partly the story that we tell will take the future. If we start telling a story of failure, then we just let people off the hook.
And something that I would like to add to that, we kind of fail also by imagining that is a one snapshot that will show us everything. And the thing that we have seen while having these conversations worldwide in the last weeks or months is that one of the things that we're doing is like analyzing one single moment and not analyze what had happened. What's the change on the trajectory? Stop seeing a picture and start seeing this as a film. If you compare where we are today from where we were in January 2019, you will see a lot of hope just in that picture. You will start to see the trajectory going into exponential phase. Not yet there. Don't take us as naive. We understand that we need to accelerate much more in order to get into the 1.5 degree trajectory. But it's beautiful to understand that everything that we're sharing today, there are many more things happening in the world that had happened very rapidly in the last 2 or 3 years are showing a change in trajectory for each sector. And when compared to where we were projecting the world back in 2015, believe me, things are much more optimistic and positive than those people that are just based on shit, we're not yet there. Sure, we're not yet there, but still a lot of good things happening. For example, I'm going to take one of the questions. We do know how, we actually have a lot of opportunities for all SMEs of the world to join. From those 4,500 companies that are part of Race to Zero, there are at least 1/3 of them being SMEs from different sectors, different regions, different industries of the world that are now both joining through the B Corp commitment. From the 4,500 companies that are part of Race to Zero, more than 1,500, 1/3 of them are companies that are not only committed through the B Corp, many of them being SMEs, but all of them committed to 2030. That is massive. And then we have the SME Climate Hub developing a lot of products and capabilities that are now supporting SMEs from different parts of the world. Inside that, we have the SME value chain, allowing big companies of the world to commit all their value chain. So all of that is already there. Use it. Make them use it because it exists and has been produced in a very short period of time and is mobilizing a lot of brains, souls, and money from all around the world.
And Gonzalo, you just triggered an important thought there. One of the with hindsight, one of the weaknesses of the Paris mechanism is that it's only every 5 years, right? Because this is now such a dynamic change that a document that's 1 year or 2 years or 3 years or 4 years old is so far away from reflecting what's scientifically known and what's technically possible. So I think part of our job in the race to zero is to drive a faster ratchet. That won't always lead to updates of NDCs, although, you know, some people are talking about, trying to have an outcome from this COP of at least encouraging countries to update their NDCs more frequently. So not waiting till 2025, maybe doing it, maybe inviting to do it in 2023. I was with Thomas Christensen, who's the Danish climate envoy in New York, and Denmark, their climate law requires the policies to be updated every year. And he's saying, and they've done that because they recognize that the things are changing so dynamically. Currently, they have a target of 70% reductions by 2030. He thinks that because of the dynamism of that process, with businesses, cities, policymakers all looking at policies every year, he thinks it's quite possible that next year they'll move to an 80% target. So you see that, but the next NDC wouldn't have to be published until 2025, right? So I think there's something from the dynamism of, there are many, many more non-state actors than there are state actors. So of course it's more dynamic, right? Because you've always got one person going faster than everybody else. So I think use that dynamism as well of explaining just how fast things are changing in the real economy, and how actually the NDCs by definition don't represent the highest level of ambition, because as soon as they're published, somebody in each country says something more ambitious at a city level or a regional level or a business level.
Thanks so much. Thanks for everyone for the insightful questions. And sorry we cannot answer everything today, but we will ensure that they have the answers in our website. And thanks so much to the champions for their comments and for their insights and for answering all the questions and for their time. Before we close down, I just wanted to give you a quick view of the next steps. Each of the individual responses received will be uploaded online today. We will then make a summary report available online next week. And stay tuned for the next steps of the campaign. And good luck to everyone in this last push towards COP. Let's continue working together in radical collaboration, as said by the champions here today, to make this a successful COP. It so needs to be. Thanks so much. Have a nice day, rest of the day for everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Danny.
Thanks,
Bye.
Danny. Thanks, Nigel. Great. Bye-bye.
Ciao.